listening to Keeping It Real with Janine, your guide to living an authentic, healthy life. A podcast about living with more joy, energy, and flow. We strive to help you create a healthier life from a wide variety of perspectives. We want you to glean some useful nuggets from each episode to help you be more in the flow with ease, joy, and purpose. So if you feel your life could be more fulfilling, healthy, and joyful, you're in the right place.
Hey everybody, I am talking with Paul O'Brien today. Paul O'Brien is an old friend. How are you, Paul?
I am great, thanks.
It's great to reconnect with you. Paul is a sought-after speaker, and I was just reading his blurb on the internet, raconteur, which I thoroughly agree with. He's a great guy to hang around and talk with. He's a bright, brilliant person, lots of knowledge. Well, let's just get right into your story, Paul, because I really like the human interest side of how a person became successful and what you've had to do to overcome challenges. Many of you may have checked out his website, tarot.com.
Tarot.com was the website that I used to run when I was an entrepreneur, and it eventually became the world's largest astrology website, which was AOL Horoscopes at the time. This was in the early 2000s. But Tarot.com no longer represents what I do. I sold it 8 years ago, and it's a great story. But I just want you to know it's changed a lot since I ran it, and it's become highly commercialized, and it doesn't really represent what it was that I created. But yes, you're right. I was the founder and CEO of Tarot.com, which included Tarot, I Ching, and astrology and numerology. And now, since I sold it, I started a nonprofit, and that's basically what I'm doing now is writing books and I have my own radio show.
Awesome. Yeah, you've had your radio show for about 30 years, haven't you?
I don't like to be that specific because it dates me age, and it makes me feel very old. But yeah, actually, I have. Since I was in my teens. No, just kidding. Yeah, and it's on KBOO radio in Portland, Oregon, and it's broadcast across Oregon and Southern Washington. But it's also a podcast. So I'm like you. I have a podcast, and which comes through my website, which is divination.com, and also through iTunes. It's called Pathways.
Great.
So that's the name of my radio show.
Okay. So yes, our listeners can check you out. Awesome. So let's start with, how did you decide to come up with the idea for tarot.com? What was your inspiration? Because at the time, I forget, was it in the 80s, I think, when you started this?
That's right. It was in the late 80s.
So you were a lot like me, ahead of your time, because I started my aromatherapy company in the 80s, and nobody even knew what the word aromatherapy was at the time.
Right. I was at least 10 years ahead of my time. Well, the whole story, I'm going to go back to the very beginning, because in my book, my latest book is called Great Decisions, Perfect Timing. Mm-hmm. And I tell this whole story. It has an autobiographical aspect to the book, but it's primarily about how to cultivate intuitive intelligence and make strategic decisions and improve your timing. And so I've kind of used my story as illustrative of many of the things I write about in the book. And one of the things I write about in the book are the stages of life. Mm-hmm. And so many people have defined the stages of life, or the passages of life, it's sometimes called. And there's a lot of different ways of divvying it up. But I went with the astrological paradigm, the cycle of Saturn. So Saturn has an orbit of 29 and a half years approximately. Mm-hmm. And so when you're 29 and a half, that's known as your Saturn return. Anybody who knows anything about astrology has heard that phrase. And so because that's considered a very significant marker, that's when Saturn comes back to where it was astrologically, or where it was in the sky the moment you were born. And right. So Saturn's all about karma and responsibilities and duty and that kind of thing. And And so I divide life up into Saturn cycles. So stage 1 of life is until your first Saturn return.
Okay.
And I call that the student stage.
Okay. And that's up till 29, right?
Right.
Okay.
And so that's when you learn who you are, what you're good at, and what you love to do. And how do you learn that? Well, according to my recommendation, it's by trying things. It's by experimenting. It's by, jumping around and trying different things. Job hopping I'm all for it. Dating a lot of people, I'm all for it. I really I'm kind of against making lifetime commitments before you're 29. Now, of course, there's a lot of exceptions to that. But anyway, that's my definition of stage 1.
Okay, so that sounds to me like it's learning about what you want and what you don't want.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
With a focus on what you want, which is based on what you discovered during stage 1 that fascinates you. And then stage 2, very briefly, is the builder provider stage. That's when you take that skill or talent that you discovered in stage 1 and you develop mastery around it and you build something. Now, whether that something is a family or a business or a nonprofit or whatever, or a cause of some sort, doesn't really matter. It's whatever it's based. But the thing that matters is that it's based on something that's that fascinated you, something that you learned about yourself or discovered about yourself. And then stage 3, which I'm in now, is the patron stage, and that's where we support future generations, and we are creating a legacy in terms of what we're teaching or writing or as a philanthropist. That's stage 3. So going back, so with that framework, and when I was in stage 1, when I was 19 years old, I was at the UC Berkeley. I was introduced. I met this. I was flirting with this pretty girl on campus, and
why am I not surprised?
And she wanted to show me this ancient book oracle system called the I Ching that I had never heard of, and show it to me and how it worked, or she was willing to. And so I was, marginally curious. I sort of assumed it was some kind of flaky fortune-telling game or something. But I wanted to hang out with her, so I let her show it to me, and she encouraged me to write down something that was on my mind or some question I had. And I scribbled something down that didn't mean anything to me. And, being a typical 19-year-old smart aleck, in those days, when I was 19-year-old males often think that being a smart aleck is the way to girls. I don't agree with that anymore, but that's where I was at then. And so I was making fun of it, really, but I was kind of just being a smart ass. And so I wrote down a question I didn't care about. I cast these coins. And I'm being all smirky and everything. And so the I Ching gives me the reading, which is hexagram number 4. There's 64 of these hexagrams, which are archetypes. So it gives me the 4th archetype in the series, and the title of it is Youthful Folly. And it describes a student who lacks respect for the teacher.
Go figure.
And I thought, my God, I'm making fun of it. It's making fun of me. So I said to this girl, I said, hey, let me try that again. Now, this time, I was no more invested in my question than I was the first time, but I had a different attitude. And my attitude this time was, I'm testing this thing. I'm going to test this and see what happens. So I cast it again, and it came back with a reading that said, questioning the sincerity of the seeker. And I thought, my God, it's testing me. And so that's when I had this cathartic realization, wow, this is an energetic mirror. This thing is not going to take any shit from me. It's going to basically reflect my energy back to me, and it's like a mirror. And so then that's what I interested and developed a personal fascination with the I Ching. And so starting at age 20, I was studying it. I got all the different versions of it. I really immersed myself in learning about it. And I also proceeded to use it as a tool in my life whenever I had a problem that logic can't handle.
Mm-hmm. So, Paul, where do you think, I mean, you've had so much experience with the I Ching. What's your perspective on where the answers come from? I mean, is it coming from your higher self, the universe, your unconscious? I have always wondered about that with like tarot cards and the I Ching.
I would say all of the above, because I wrote a book called Divination: Sacred Tools for Reading the Mind of God. That came much later. I didn't write any books until after I was a successful entrepreneur and I had a company. That basically, my answer to that question, Janine, is systems, whether it's the I Ching or tarot cards or astrology or numerology, any of these systems that help you, they're basically what they are is intuitive decision-making aids. I don't think they give you the answer. I think what they do is they use an archetype. You use some synchronistic process like casting coins mm-hmm. or picking cards. Mm-hmm. And that each one of those cards is an archetype. There's 78 archetypes in tarot. There's 64 archetypes in the I Ching. Astrology's got, 12 signs, 12 houses. It's got a ton of archetypes. Mm-hmm. So you pick some cards, you cast some coins, and an archetype turns up. And that archetype is related to your insides, because we have all of the archetypes inside of us. That's what archetypes mean. Is like there's the I Ching divides the human condition into 64 states. Tarot divides it into 70 states, and then there's a lot of permutations and stuff. Mm-hmm. So the theory is that the archetype that comes up for you when you are meditating or contemplating or concentrating on some issue of concern is exactly the archetype that you can benefit from looking at right now. And so what that does is it stimulates your intuition. Mm-hmm. And that's what I say these tools do. They stimulate your intuition to help you think outside the box around problems that logic can't handle.
Mm-hmm. That's a great definition. I like that.
So it's not about giving you the answers. You get the answers by being stimulated by the text or the images, and then but you have to read between the lines, because an I Ching reading is not going to tell you exactly what to do. It's not going to tell you exactly the way things are going to turn out, but it's going to it's going to sort of like stimulate your intuition so that you come up with a third option. Usually we think in terms of black and white, we're going to fight or flight or right. freeze. Right. But there's always more two solutions to any problem. And we often can never see the third or fourth possible solutions because we're so black and white.
Right. Right.
Right and wrong and all that. So that's the way I look at it. And it just helps you make better decisions, which is why ultimately, after having written a Western version of the I Ching, and mm-hmm. that's kind of a little further down my story, because I was fascinated by the I Ching in my adult life. I used it for problems that logic can't handle. If I had a problem that logic can handle, I didn't use the I Ching. I didn't use tarot cards.
Right.
I just used logic. Logic's a good tool, but it can't handle issues like relationships and timing and negotiation strategies, things like that logic can't handle. So that's when I would use each.
The other, the other point that I want to make is, besides stimulating your intuition, is that it's more information. From my perspective, if you can't make a decision, if you're having trouble making a decision, you need more information. And this is one way to get more information.
Right. And that information is a reflection of your insides. It's a reflection of some energetic configuration that is potentially within you. Mm-hmm. So you're really getting your answers from within yourself. Now, you could call that the unconscious. You could call that the mind of God. You could look at it, any number of ways, but it's not an external answer that's coming to you. It's not like this outside agency. It's basically stimulating what's already inside of you. I mean, we know everything. Right. It's just that we don't know that we know it. We don't remember all the things that we know.
And we have a hard time accessing it.
Okay, so now to finish the story, when I was in stage 1, there was another thing that I was fascinated by, and that was software. And I had this friend who worked at a computer center in Eugene, Oregon. It was nonprofit, and it was a gigantic computer. It would take up, half this room and, have huge mag tapes, but it had one tiny little terminal, which was the size of an oscilloscope. And my friend had wired up these joysticks and got this software from MIT that basically turned this gigantic machine into a game machine. And so we would go there late at night and we'd smoke pot and we'd commandeer this $150,000 computer, which was called a mini computer. And like I said, it was huge and it had less power than my iPhone has now. But in any case, I was just fascinated by the concept of software. You know, here's this, somebody wrote some code that makes it possible for my friend and I to have this immersive experience playing a game. Now, I'm not really a gamer. I've never been much of a gamer. But I was just so blown away by what that indicated with the potential of that. You know, I thought, wow, I could see how someday people could use this to develop multimedia, develop educational or even spiritual experiences that are facilitated by an interactive computer system. So I had visions of multimedia in 1973,
wow,
which was 20 years before CD-ROMs even existed. So in 1988, and I got into the software business, which I was so fascinated by. I got into it as a secretary because I could type. Mm-hmm. So I started out my career in software as a secretary. I remember I was making $660 a month.
Wow.
When I started, and then I just kind of leapfrogged my way up I'm a marketing specialist, you know, and I ended up becoming an executive in a high-tech firm. And in 1988, I found myself having problems that logic can't handle, that were rooted in the office politics of this very dysfunctional organization. And I actually was starting to take the I Ching to work.
Oh, wow.
And then it occurred to me, well, I sure wish I could do this on my Macintosh. We were an early Macintosh networking company in 1988, and I was the vice president of the company. And so that was a big light bulb went off, and I go, oh my God, that would be so cool. And all of those fantasies of multimedia that I'd had 20 years or 15 years earlier, and in my fascination with the I Ching. And so there was an intersection between two things I was fascinated by. And what I did was I took my entire life savings and I hired a programmer and an artist from outside the company and created one of the first multimedia titles ever. It was on multiple floppy disks because there were no CD-ROMs. And it was called Synchronicity, which was the very first divination software. I didn't know it. I didn't know it was the first divination software. I didn't know it was the first multimedia software. But it was just driven because I had this fascination that was so overpowering. I spent my entire life savings, which was about 50 grand, to make a prototype and to sort of, you know, create a product. But in the process, I had to write my own version of the I Ching. That's how I became an author. And I quit my job. And this is what's great about the story of my success. What's remarkable about it is that I left an executive position where I was making a lot of money and had a very promising career ahead of me. But I wanted to do something meaningful. I chose meaning over money. Mm-hmm. And even I could never imagine that I Ching software was going to be a big hit, and it never was. It was the least remunerative thing I ever did, but it was the soul of the company that I created, because then we added do-it-yourself tarot on top of that, you know, like 8 years later, and then we added astrology, and I got the franchise with AOL, and it became the largest astrology website in the world, as well as the largest tarot and I Ching website. And I started to be pursued for acquisition, you know, in 2006. And I thought, no, I'm not interested. You know, I'm finally making money after 13 years of not paying myself half the time and barely keeping my mortgage together and barely making payroll. All of a sudden, with that AOL horoscopes franchise, I was making seven figures. Oh my God, who would have ever thought that? I had no exit strategy. I was not planning on selling it, but then we started to be pursued, and Disney came up here to buy us, and Barnes and Noble wanted to buy it, and I just told them, oh, well, thank you very much, but you know. But then I started to think, well, what would I do if I got my number, which means I don't have to earn a living in any conventional way. And I thought, well, I would start a nonprofit. I would write more books. I would extend the reach of my radio show and podcast, and I'd do a lot more traveling. And so in 2007, I sold the company for millions of dollars. And it's just basically, and now I run a nonprofit. But it's basically the story of a person who chose meaning over money. It's kind of one of those do what you love stories. And so I wrote it up in the book, Great Decisions, Perfect Timing, in a way that helps other people find what fascinates them and maybe inspire people to go for it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're all facing choices every day. We'll get into talking about beliefs. I love your term belief engineering, because I think that's a great way to describe beliefs and how they inform our lives. But with the choices, you had to make choices throughout this whole process. I know you were bankrupt. You went bankrupt, what, twice?
I lost everything. I lost everything twice. I never personally filed for bankruptcy, but the company went bankrupt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you had tough choices to make to keep going. And I was reading in your book, well, let's see, what did I write down? Facing choices that are mutually exclusive. So for you, what are the parameters for you of making tough choices? It's obviously not financial.
Well, I think financial should enter into it. It's like that's what my whole latest book is about: great decisions and perfect timing. Perfect timing is a decision. So you're using the word choices. I'd say decisions. I'd say decision making is the highest leverage human skill.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, the quality of our success and happiness in life is directly related to the quality of the decisions or choices that we make.
Absolutely.
And so the whole book is about how to make better decisions. And there's a chapter in there on divination, but it does, and the I Ching, but it doesn't depend on that. The book doesn't hinge on that. There's also a chapter in there on logic. Mm-hmm. And so, logic is a really good filter, even if it can't finally make the decision. Like a visionary decision is what I call it.
Yes. Let's get into that.
A strategic personal decision, I call it visionary decision making. Mm-hmm. It involves logic and intuition working together, but it's primarily led by intuition. And so the subtitle of the book is Cultivating Intuitive Intelligence, because that's the hardest thing. That's the hardest thing to do. We have a hard time accessing intuition when we need it most. Mm-hmm. The reason is, and I have this rule in there called OBriens Law. And OBriens Law stipulates the stronger the feeling, the stronger the emotion, the less trustworthy it is as a criterion for decision making.
Now that sounds a little different from what I've often heard. Can you delve into that a little bit?
It's actually totally counterintuitive. Most people think that's how you should make decisions, is basically whatever you have the strongest feelings about. And my argument is that intuition doesn't show up as a strong feeling. Intuition is a still, quiet voice. It's a quiet voice. It shows up as a gut feeling, but it's not like overwhelmingly strong, like something that's the strongest feelings are basically have a lot of ego behind it. And they're usually driven by fear or greed or jealousy. The strongest feelings are not trustworthy. They're good. I mean, they offer you information about where you're at or about what your issues might be or what your challenges might be. But you should never make a decision when you feel on the basis of a strong feeling. In other words, it's a lot better to calm down and do some meditating. There's all these techniques in the book on how you can use mindfulness to open up the intuitive sense. Mm-hmm. But the strong feelings overwhelm the intuitive sense. When you're under the influence of strong feelings, your intuition is not operative. You can't even notice it because it's drowned out by all the noise in the system, not only from your strong feelings, but from all the distractions in life. We're bombarded on all fronts these days, and we're highly distracted. And intuition is, it's sort of like, you're sharing some kind of Wi-Fi, some wireless router with a bunch of other people, and there's, and there's a few people who are downloading huge videos or something. You can't get enough bandwidth and you're just trying to get this delicate little, or like a ham radio. Remember the ham radio?
Oh, yes. Yeah, my dad had one.
You're trying to find this very faint signal from so far away, but it's drowned out by all the static and the stronger signals. Well, so if you think of the five senses as antenna, like vision and hearing, etc., these are huge antennas sticking out of the brain, and they're downloading gobs of information all the time, for most of us.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think of the intuition as a little sixth antenna, you got the five fingers, the five senses. Let's say there's a little tiny little finger on the end. That's calibrated to pick up it's a small antenna, and it picks up a very fine signal, which is easily drowned out by all the noise. And then when you bring in strong emotions on top of it, that's like putting this containment dome over it. I say, and I really mean this, that having a clear intuitive insight is almost a minor miracle for people these days.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, when you need your intuition the most is when it's hardest to access because of all of the noise and the emotional perturbation that's going on. And so this book is about how can you create an opening so that you can actually get information
mm-hmm.
from the intuition. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't use logic too. You use logic to rule out all kinds of bad choices. And there's a whole chapter on a logic technique that I teach, which is different than pros and cons. Pros and cons is not the best way to go.
Uh-huh.
Because let's say you have four choices and you do the pros and cons. The cons of one are going to be like a pro of another one. And the problem with considering the cons is they're much more. We have much bigger emotional reaction to fear than anything else.
Right.
And so the power of negativity, the cons outweigh the pros even when they shouldn't. So I have this system called weighted pros that I teach in that chapter, which is, you add up the value of the pros of each choice and you ignore all the cons altogether and you just go with the one with the highest value. Or maybe, and then you bring your intuition into the mix. It's not an exact formula. You can't give an exact formula for intuition. But you can open you can open it. You can get access to it. And that's really the best you can do is you can get your ego out of the way so that you can actually hear, I don't know, you could call it the voice of God or the voice of inspiration or however you want to characterize it. It doesn't really matter. Mm-hmm. And so that's the visionary decision making is it's led by intuition, but it's supported by logic. And that's what the whole book is about. And our beliefs get in the way too, but we haven't got to that yet.
Right. So I have a question. What would you say to someone, like I've known people who just feel it's all about logic. Intuition has no place. Everything needs to be logical. What would you say to someone who feels that intuition isn't important? I mean, for me, I find my intuition is generally 99% right on, and I need to pay attention to it. And it's really, I guess that's why I'm doing the podcast, is because I followed my intuition. But some people just, they don't trust their intuition, or they don't feel it's valuable.
Right. Well, I mean, we have glorified logic in the West since, the Renaissance. And, science, the scientific method, the scientific point of view, basically relies on logic. And that's a really good tool. Logic is very good for taking things apart and answering the question, what are things made of? Mm-hmm. But it's not, and then we can re-engineer things and we can do different combinations and put them back together and invent stuff. But it's terrible for answering a question like, what kinds of things go together in time? When it comes to timing questions, logic is useless. Mm-hmm. So I would say to somebody like that, say logic's great. And, there's the things that it can handle are important. It's a good thing to use logic. But, there's so many things that logic can't handle. Relationships is like the most obvious universal example. You know?
Right. That's about the most illogical thing there is.
Yeah. I mean, how you, in anything that where feelings are front and center, you know, sort of like, you know, the kind of question logic can't handle is, you know, how do I relate to my partner who hasn't spoken to me for a week? Logic's not going to, you know, logic might say, well, go to a counselor, but that doesn't really answer the question. So there's a lot of problems that logic can't handle. And so then there's a lot of theories on intuition too. And, you know, it's like you can think of intuition as a higher form of logic in the sense that intuition is about pattern recognition on a much, much broader scale than logic can handle. I mean, we don't know shit. I mean, our knowledge, even in science, is so limited. And for anybody to think that logic is going to provide all the answers they need, they're going to live a very limited life. And they're going to deny themselves a lot of experiences because they're going to, you know, it's the typical scientific attitude is, well, if we can't measure it, then it must not matter.
Right.
That's not true. That's not even close to being true. That's a very sterile point of view. So now I look at intuition as pattern recognition and having a sense of patterns that are beyond our ability to measure or even map out entirely. So that's what timing is 100% intuition. Timing is a decision. You know, there's two questions you have to answer when you're faced with a decision point or a choice point. And one of them is, what is the best next move I could make? It's sort of like playing chess. And the second question is, and when should I make it? You know,
right.
when should I pull the trigger? That's the timing question. The first question, what is the best next move? Logic can give you a lot of help with that. But the second question, when should I pull the trigger? Logic is useless. That's the timing question. So if you want to develop good timing, you really need to develop your intuition. And if you improve your intuition by, you know, discovering it and getting access to it, then your timing is automatically going to improve.
And timing is so important. And timing's related to synchronicity and how everything is synchronous in our lives. And
exactly,
it's all, yeah, wow. So we're talking about the importance of intuition. How does somebody determine whether a decision is based on their intuition or based on their ego?
Well, you know, I run a test against, I mean, there's nothing wrong with ego. I mean, ego is like a very good lieutenant. You know, its job is to make sure that you're safe. Its job, you know, its job is to take care of business in the dualistic realm. But it's a terrible general. It's a good lieutenant, it shouldn't be leading your life, because when you become egocentric and then, you know, because what it's doing is it's dividing everything up. Like I said, it's very good at analyzing things and taking things apart. And so your ego is basically your sense of yourself as a separate being. So when you're operating in the dualistic realm, in the realm where you've got self and other, or a subject, which is you, and object, you know, when you're dealing in the world where you are performing or acting as an individuated agent, you know, that's what the ego is about. But when you start to look at things more holistically, you know, and in terms of relationships and in terms of love, and in terms of harmony and in terms of, like, you know, healing, as in healing the planet, as in being in tune with nature, ego can't do that, you know, because that takes you beyond the ego. You have to look at a much bigger picture. So I always have this test, and I talk about this in the latest book too. It's like, I always ask myself the question, is this thing that I think would be good for me, or this thing that I want, is it good for everybody? Because if it's not good for all beings, if it's not good holistically, then it's not good for me, because even logic tells me this. I mean, I am interconnected with everything.
Right. And you are everything.
Yeah. We are all one. We are all interrelated. So if something is bad for somebody else, it's bad for me.
Right.
Because, you know, we can't escape our connectivity. We can't escape our interrelationships with everything. So I always do that question. It's like, is there anybody that this would harm in any way? That's a filtering question that I have.
I think that's a great question.
And is it something that's going to help me grow, or is it going to help me contract into some habitual, comfort zone? Mm-hmm. That's another question, because the ego, wants to gratify the senses. It wants to, wants instant gratification. It basically doesn't really care about anybody else. It's basically looking out for you. And like
as
I said,
as it should.
Yeah, there's value in that. It's not like you want to get rid of your ego.
Well, that's something I hear a lot, is that getting rid of the ego. And I'm like, no, the ego's there for a reason. It just needs to be in its place.
Exactly. It needs to be in service to higher self, not the other way around.
Awesome. I like the way that you said that.
Right.
So let's talk about perfect timing and how that fits in and synchronicity. Because I think from my perspective, there are no quote unquote coincidences, that everything is a product of synchronicity and of flow, if you want to call it that.
Right. Yeah. Well, synchronicity is really the definition of perfect timing. When I called the book Great Decisions, Perfect Timing, I knew people were going to say, oh, get off it. I mean, nobody has perfect timing. And, and there's truth in that, but it was kind of a jazzy title, but actually everybody has perfect timing. If you look at it from a very cosmic point of view, everything happens for a reason. And synchronicity says that things are related in time as well as in space. You see, the logic and the scientific method doesn't even consider timing. So if you do a controlled experiment on Tuesday afternoon and you do that same controlled experiment on Sunday morning, you're going to get exactly the same result, because timing and time have been taken out of the equation altogether. Mm-hmm. Whereas the ancient sages from the East, China and India, they thought that timing was the most important thing. They were concerned with, doing things in the right order, doing things at the right time, and not missing windows of opportunity. And so they were trying to answer a different question than what are things made of. They were trying to answer a question, what kinds of things go together in time? So they saw that things are related in time. And that's the synchronicity principle. There are no accidents. So coincidences often have meaning. Maybe they always have meaning, but they often have significant meaning. It's sort of like a lot of times you hear about this in relationships, about how people meet. And if they hadn't missed that first train, they would have never met their beloved on the second train and stuff like that, And these things have like life-changing impacts. So synchronicity is the definition of perfect timing. But timing in the personal sense, it means, answering the question, when should I make my next move? Not what is the best next move, but once I figured out what might be the next best move, then I can think, well, when should I do it? And that is an intuitive decision. So that is by a way of being in sync with the moment. Now, people who are, there's a lot of ways we make bad decisions, and I talk about this in the book. One of the ways we make bad decisions is being too emotional. We already talked about that earlier in this. But another way that we make bad decisions is by being overly analytical and overly reliant on logic. And a lot of times when we're overly analytical and we think that logic is going to give us the answer, we keep analyzing and analyzing, but we never have enough information. So we're waiting for more information, and you end up missing the window of opportunity. You end up not even paying attention to the timing because you're procrastinating in favor of waiting for more information. So, it's like if you want to be a successful entrepreneur, you need to be about a year ahead of the market. Not 10 years like me, although I was lucky because nobody else chased that idea. And 10 years later, I picked it up again. But you want to be a year and a half ahead of the market, not too far ahead. And you certainly don't want to be behind. And so, but if you're ahead of the market and you're going to make a bet on that, that is a timing issue. And that is an intuition issue for sure. It's, like me, nobody everybody thought I was crazy. All of my peers, I mean, I was a high-tech executive, and all of my peers in the industry, my friends, they thought, what the hell are you doing? There's no market for I Ching software, and you're leaving a high-paying career to go chase this ridiculous product idea? And they were right from a logical point of view.
Mm-hmm.
But, I basically said, well, maybe I am crazy. It's sort of like, but I'm just overcome with fascination and love for this intersection between two things that have fascinated me for 15 years, the I Ching and software.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, I got to go with this. It's wherever God drags me, I will follow. And that was my motto.
I love that. And at some point, you have to make a decision, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you obviously didn't have the information that told you this was going to be a success.
Oh,
so, God. So you had to trust your intuition. You had to trust your sense of purpose, perhaps, and just make a decision.
Yeah, and in one sense, my timing was way off. My timing was not perfect. You could argue I was 10 years ahead of my time. Then later, when I sold the company in 2007, people would say, God, you really do have perfect timing. I mean, that was the perfect time to sell a company just before the crash of 2008.
Mm-hmm.
I said, yeah, well, it is perfect timing now, but it didn't feel like it during the 13 years when I was starving. So, you never, but then again, it was perfect because if I hadn't done it back then, I had to do it when I was inspired to do it.
Right.
And I had to learn all the hard lessons of seeing my company go bankrupt, the first round, and learning some hard lessons. The first time around, I gave all the employees stock. There weren't very many employees, but I gave everybody stock, and then I learned a lesson from that. You should never give anybody, if you're doing bootstrapping a startup like I did, it's a mistake to give people stock unless they ask for it. And unless they are, critical to the mission, because if they don't ask for it, it becomes an entitlement and it just complicates your life and it doesn't really do what you were hoping it would do, which is bring them in alignment with the vision. But if they are in alignment with the vision, they're going to ask for it.
Interesting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's just kind of a side point.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sure that'll click with somebody. So let's get into belief engineering because and how we choose our beliefs, because I really I think the whole idea of beliefs, deep core beliefs that self-sabotage us, our beliefs engineer our surroundings. I mean, what we see and the way we live is a product. What we feel, what we think is a product of our beliefs.
Yeah, that's right. And so, I have a whole chapter called Belief Engineering, as you mentioned. And basically what I'm recommending is that we should engineer our own beliefs. Basically what it comes down to is beliefs limit us and beliefs can empower us. And they empower us in the sense that if you don't believe you can do something, guess what? You can't.
Right.
If I don't believe I can walk across the room without stumbling and falling, I won't be able to do it. But I never questioned that belief. But there's a lot of so. And then if I believe that I can't do something, guess what? You're right. So what you believe is very important, but it's not sacred. In other words, I make this distinction. It's like you're not saved by your beliefs, as if there's some like perfect set of unchanging beliefs that you're supposed to adhere to like a fundamentalist religion. To me, that's absurd. To me, sticking to a belief system that can never change and that is not subject to testing or upgrading, that is a learning disorder. Mm-hmm. I'm totally against totalitarian ideologies. And that includes religions that are belief-centric, like Christianity and Islam, where if you doubt the articles of faith, that's the devil tempting you. This is a closed system, and I am totally against it. Now, on the other hand, that's why I like the Eastern philosophies like Buddhism and Taoism, because they don't dictate what you should believe. Mm-hmm. In fact, they basically recommend that you test everything and that you learn to trust your intuition. That's what converted me. I went to Catholic school for 13 years, but I took a Buddhist meditation retreat when I was 30, and I heard the story of the Buddha saying, don't put your faith in teachers, don't put your faith in scriptures, don't put your faith in tradition, don't even believe what I'm telling you right now, unless it rings true for you in here. And he points to his heart. Mm-hmm. I thought, oh my God, I've been told what to think, what to believe, what to feel, and what to act, how to behave my entire life. I've never been told. You learn to trust yourself and let that be your ultimate criteria. And I thought, I basically had a conversion experience just from hearing that one talk, and I realized, oh yes. And that sort of like opened me up to realizing, oh, you know what? Beliefs need to be upgraded. Beliefs are provisional operating assumptions.
I like that, provisional operating assumptions.
They're important and they're useful and you can leverage them, but you need to own them. You need to voluntarily endorse them rather than just believe things because you were taught to believe them or believe them because it was demanded that you believe them under the penalty of going to hell or anything like that. You know, we need to be adults and it's a choice. Beliefs are a decision. Beliefs should be a decision that adults make, not a decision that a 3-year-old makes on the basis of wanting to get along with his or her parents. Right. And, you know, and this whole idea that your beliefs should never change, that is ridiculous. That's not a mark of character. That's a mark of retardation.
Well, of course, especially, I mean, even if you think now you're talking about the constrictions of the beliefs of religion, but what about a person who has been brought up in an abusive household and the kinds of beliefs that they form about relationships, about how to treat each other and things like that? Those are all badly skewed because of the way a person was brought up.
Oh, yeah. Like, I'll give you an example. I have a mentally ill mother who basically was a narcissist and who trained me to take care of her feelings above and beyond anything else. And what I learned, and I never realized this, and they call this a core belief. These are the beliefs that are based on conclusions we came to when we were 2 or 3 or 4 years old.
Right. Very important time.
Right. And so then we never know them because they're virtually unconscious or subconscious.
Right.
And we can recover them in therapy. We can recover them in hypnosis, and we can come to learn what they are. So I wasn't until I was 30 years old, and I was in some kind of personal growth training that involved a lot of Gestalt and I realized I had this core belief that I needed to be perfect in order to get love. In other words, I had to perform in order to earn love. And only if I performed close to perfect, I might get a few crumbs of love. And that was really the best I could do because my mother was not affectionate. She was not, she was totally self-centered and, just a really damaged person. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I feel sorry for her because I can only imagine what she went through as one of 13 children who never got her needs addressed or met. So, but in any case, in my life, I realized I had this belief I have to be perfect in order to be lovable. And I realized, oh, fuck, that is, pardon my French.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
I said, I can't even imagine what that's done to my life. Where I don't expect to be loved for being a human being. I don't expect to be loved unless I'm doing something for you and I'm sacrificing something I would rather do for myself. Mm-hmm. And that was the way I ran my whole life. I was trained to take care of my mother until I was like 12 or 13 years old, not to mention my younger brothers and sisters. And nobody ever cared about what I wanted or needed. Nobody was a slightest bit interested. And, so that's an example of a core belief. And it was so liberating to get past that and to start loving myself and to start loving my inner child and to realize I am lovable just for who I am.
And that was a belief that was running the program of who you are, and that you didn't even know it was there. And I think that's how the majority of people conduct their lives.
Yeah, well, that's true. Most of us have these core beliefs that we're not even aware of. That's why in the belief engineering thing, the first step is to become aware of what you do believe. And I have a whole section of that chapter that deals with these unconscious beliefs that you might or might not have. And there are ways to sort of like figure it out. You can reverse engineer, what must I be thinking?
Yes, it's a very good chapter, by the way, and I recommend it to everyone to read.
Oh, thank you. Well, that's really what I do now. The Divination Foundation is about personal and cultural evolution, personal growth and cultural evolution. And so in terms of evolving the culture, I'm really encouraging people to develop their own belief system and have it be provisional. Let yourself test it. It's like the apps on your iPhone. You got to upgrade your apps every once in a while.
Yeah, that's a very good analogy.
So, it's called learning.
And it's also about flexible thinking.
Right.
I think that's really important, is having a flexibility of thinking, being able to say that this is what I believe right now. This is what I think right now. But that doesn't mean that as new information comes in, it won't change. It very well may change, and it probably will change.
Yeah, everybody is yeah, you're right. I think the two biggest problems psychologically in society are closed-mindedness and self-righteousness. Mm-hmm. And they go together.
Yes, they do. And we're seeing a lot of that these days.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot of that, and it kind of goes along with a degradation of education and a higher level of illiteracy, and people sitting in front of TVs and just passively consuming information from Fox News, which I call fake news. They are the original fake news. And 40% of America won't watch any other channel.
I know, the whole thing is so crazy. It's so crazy. And I'm going to post something on my Facebook page. I think I'll put it on both. It's a Dr. Gabor. It's something that Stephen had sent me. And he talks about, he's a psychiatrist or psychologist who talks about the mindset that has created what we have today and how we've all created it. Every one of us has created what is going on today, and how people who are hurt and feeling disenfranchised how they are seeing things. It's amazing. I think it so accurately explains why we are where we are today.
I see it as ultimately a spiritual problem.
Yes.
Because it's all about the triumph of ego, which starts to feed on itself after a while and destroy itself. And that's what we're in. Donald Trump is like the archetype of a narcissistic ego out of control. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the whole problem. Everybody is so in love with their own image in their own mind and their own opinions, as if what they think is so important. Everybody's just like performing. And we've become more isolated. It's a performance-based culture. Facebook, for so many people, is just an ongoing performance, and they just want more attention. And the same thing with a lot of the other social media. I'm not against social media, and I think Facebook's wonderful for family groups and has all kinds of good things. But we're out of control in terms of our mentality is so egoistic, and it's so self-centered, and that's being glorified as the way to go. Donald Trump, the great businessman, and it's unbelievable.
I know
how self-absorbed. This is the age of narcissism.
Well, and look at. I was reading something about teenagers and the higher incidence of suicide and depression because they're so focused on getting likes and their Facebook page and Snapchat, and it's crazy. Yeah.
No, it's just, America is the extreme. America has had the most extreme levels of mobility and also the highest levels of personal loneliness. People are so friggin' lonely, and they're trying to sustain meaningful relationships through social media is the evidence of that. They're so estranged, and then even when they get together in person, they can't stop tuning into their phones and seeing if they got some attention from this direction or that direction. People are so lonely, and it's gotten to such an extreme. I was just having breakfast this morning with somebody who had done a book about the national highway system, which was put in place in the 50s. Mm-hmm. And that's when they tore up all the trolley cars and things from cities, and everybody's supposed to have a car and everything. And so now, there's so much mobility that everybody is distant from, where their grandparents live. There's so much isolation. And it's no wonder that people turn to social media. I mean, it's just part of the matrix, Mm-hmm. I'm not sure it's making things any much better, but in Europe, everybody knows where they're from. Everybody has a sense of. I mean, I'm generalizing, but
right.
People know what village their great grandparents came from. They know where they have a much more grounded sense of identity. Now, I'm not talking about immigrants. I'm talking about this is my observation of the people I've met in Europe. I've been there many times, and over here, everybody is so uprooted. Is so And there's some attempts at establishing community and overcoming that and communal living, but not
enough. Not enough.
No, people are spending 12 hours, a week on TV, and they're spending another 12 hours a week on social media. They're not really relating in a personal way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I know when I go into the town, into Nelson, and we don't have cell service here where I live, and that's the way people want it. So when I go into town and I see everybody sitting at the cafe or, in the restaurant or wherever, and everybody's got their nose in their freaking phone, I'm like, what is that?
Even there, even in Nelson, huh?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean,
right.
It's an endemic. It's everywhere.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Hopefully we will figure that out and start having more self-control over our egocentric impulses.
That sounds like a very good idea. So how about, to wrap up, just taking kind of into consideration the little banter we've had back and forth here, how does your visionary decision making and the belief engineering and intuitive intelligence, how can all of this, what do I want to say, help to make things better, help to raise our consciousness, help to make us less lonely, help to bring us a new sense of our place in the world?
Well, I'm an apostle of decision making as a lever of personal power.
Okay.
And that's what all of my work really kind of adds up to. That's what the I Ching always meant to me, as it was a support for the proposition that I could make better decisions. And so I think we have to make better decisions. Now that's going to involve letting go of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
And so
in what way?
Well, like maybe letting go of putting your phone on airplane mode, when you get together with somebody. I mean, that's letting go of your connectivity. So you're making a sacrifice for the sake of a higher value. So, I think, we have to make better choices. We have to make better decisions in this it's kind of a holistic problem. We need to have better self-knowledge, which means, which includes knowing what we believe. Mm-hmm. And then, part of what we believe is what we value, what we want. And so then we need to, rather than doing the easiest thing, which is to be a passive consumer, we regulate that. So that's a decision. That's a decision of how you spend your time, where you invest your attention. So we have all these choices all the time, but we're not really making conscious decisions. So my solution is to become more conscious about your decision making.
Yes, and more conscious about the interconnectedness of all things, and how those decisions that we make not only affect ourselves, but affect everything around us, and maybe even affect other people in other countries based on the choices we make on what we buy.
Oh, yeah. And we're going to be forced to do this. I mean, we can't keep burning fossil fuels like we are.
Right.
So, when it becomes, it's probably, hopefully it won't be too late, but at some point, everybody's going to have to give up their gasoline engines, or some semblance of that. We're looking at having to make some very hard choices as the result of being lazy and negligent for 200 years. During this petroleum bonanza.
Well, and let's not forget all of the products, the plastic products that we buy in volumes that are based on petroleum.
Right, but at least in those cases, we're not burning it until later when we dispose of it. Yeah, right. I mean, we've had this petroleum bonanza going on since 1850, and it's changed everything. It just basically the Industrial Revolution went on to steroids. After when they started running out of whale oil, and then there was kerosene, and then there was oil and petroleum. I mean, that the population of the world has just gone out of control. The harm to the atmosphere is out of control. But it's given us this standard of living, this comfort zone that people are pretty addicted to. People will vote on the basis of what is the cost of a gallon of gas, rather than what is the cost of, black lung disease.
Right.
It's just amazing. So anyway, we have to make better decisions, and we have to be ready to let go of things. And I think simplification is a good decision, because if I don't know. We really have to start making better decisions, that's for sure. And you're right. And we have to have better self-knowledge, which includes the fact that we're all in this together.
Right. And I think a good way to wrap up is, I know in your book you talk about a synchronistic lifestyle, and as being one of the ways to move forward and to help to change things for the better. Maybe just explain what a synchronistic lifestyle is.
Well, the synchronistic lifestyle is when you have more balance in your life. What happens in such that your intuition, you have access to your intuition. What happens is, one of the things that happens is you start to notice synchronicities more often. Synchronicities are happening all the time. In fact, you could say everything is synchronistic. Nothing happens that's not supposed to happen, given the entire, picture and all of the forces that come to bear on this moment.
Right. And just because it's not what you want doesn't mean it's not synchronistic.
Yeah. And even if it's not something that you even recognize as being significant, things are unfolding perfectly according to plan. We don't know the plan, and maybe there is no fixed plan. And it's not our job to know the plan. It's just our job to accept things. So that's a belief. In the belief engineering chapter, I recommend a few provisional beliefs, and I'm saying, hey, try this out. This is a visionary belief, and try it and see if it doesn't work better for you. And one of them has to do with the idea that everything happens for a reason. Okay, so I can't prove that, but I can't disprove it either, and I choose to believe it. So this is a visionary belief that I adopt on a provisional basis, just to see how it works for me. So you ask, what can people do? And this is what they can do, is they can start engineering their belief system to work better for them and produce better results. So by believing that everything happens for a reason, or that there are no accidents, that helps me be more accepting. That helps me accept the way things are unfolding, whether I'm in control or whether I understand it even. I can just make the assumption, hey, there's a good reason this is happening. And there's no point me, having panic attacks about it. I don't understand why, but that's not my job. It's my job to roll with the punches and continue to make good decisions. Another belief, visionary belief that I recommend in that chapter is change is your friend.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so what is the I Ching? I Ching translates as Book of Changes. It's all about change management, which is all about making the right moves at the right time. The right move at the right time. That's the timing question. That's the what and the when. And so that's what change, the management of change is all about. So if we think of change as our friend and we believe in evolution, then it's easier for us to adapt. If we believe that change is a threat, and because we don't want to believe in evolution, like the right-wing people.
Well, and so often people are afraid of change.
Yeah, they're afraid of change, and so that's what I mean. They consider it a threat, and they're trying to keep things from changing, and that isn't helping at all. I mean, we need massive change.
Yes, we do.
But it scares people. So, I mean, I would, start to develop visionary beliefs that help you make better decisions and help you be more adaptable and more light on your feet. And that's covered in the chapter of the book, Great Decisions, Perfect Timing. By the way, if anybody's interested in the paperback, it's out now, and it's really the best place to get it is through Amazon. It's not in a lot of bookstores. We published it ourselves. Mm-hmm. And, so we don't have like the same kind of distribution that a book that's published by a publishing house. But on the other hand, we have a lot more freedom in terms of giving it away. In fact, I would like to make a gift to your show and your listeners. If anybody wanted to look at the book or read the book in an electronic format, I have set up a web page where you can download it for iPad or Kindle or PDF for free if you sign up for our newsletter. And I'm going to
that's awesome. That's awesome.
I'm going to tell you what that is right now, Janine, because it's very easy to remember, but people should probably write it down.
I'll put it on the website too.
Okay. It's divination.com/ free book.
Free. Oh, that's easy. Free book.
Yeah,
so divination.com / free book.
Right. And then that gives them, they can choose which format they want. But I can't give the paperback away for obvious reasons. And a lot of people, and the paperback's beautiful. It's getting pretty good reviews on Amazon too.
Oh, nice. Good. I can see why. I've read most of it. And even though for me, there isn't really much in it that's really new, I like the way you have explained and fleshed out the information in new ways for me. So.
Well, thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
I mean, the Jungian stuff in part 1, where I define synchronicity and archetypes and the collective unconscious, those are things that you already knew, and a lot of people have a sense of it. But Carl Jung's writings he's very difficult to read. It was translated from the German. I've been told that I did a really good job of explaining those concepts in language that a layman can understand, and that was one of my goals. Because it's such important concepts. Jung was fantastic, and I'm really glad to see that his work is coming into the limelight. Mm-hmm. Well, it's really been a pleasure. It's been such a pleasure being on your show. I really appreciate you doing the show in general for the sake of the common welfare. And I'm honored to be one of your guests.
Well, thank you very much. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed our chat. I enjoyed your information, and I hope our listeners get a lot out of it. So remember, once again, if you would like a free copy of Paul's book, divination.com / free book. And the book is Great Decisions, Perfect Timing, and it's by Paul O'Brien. And thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Janine, and all the best to you and all of your listeners.
Thank you. Take care.
You too. Bye.
Ciao. Thank you, Paul O'Brien, for a fun and insightful conversation. I'm particularly intrigued by the idea of cultivating intuitive intelligence, because to cultivate something implies you have to put in time and energy. I've always felt the part of the equation for successful outcomes is in the timing, being in the flow, in intuitive knowingness of when to act and when to wait. And if you just don't know what to do, there probably isn't enough information yet. Sometimes using a divination system like the I Ching can add that extra bit of information to help you make a great decision in perfect timing. I'll also use muscle testing sometimes if I don't know what else to do. Check out Paul's Great Decisions, Perfect Timing ebook. It's a generous gift from Paul to you in the hope that it can help you make decisions to create the life you desire. Thanks for listening to Keeping It Real with Janine, your guide to living an authentic, healthy life. This has been podcast episode 13 with Paul O'Brien. Go to the podcast website, www.realjanine.com, to listen or download this episode and check out my other fascinating guests. You can also use iTunes, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast app. Please leave comments on the website if you are inspired. And Janine is Janean. Be well and take care.